Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to follow Inderes Sustainability Day. My name is Karoliina Loikkanen, and I'm heading Inderes Sustainability Solutions. Today we're focusing on climate change, and we have two companies presenting their approach on the related phenomena. We hear a bit about the risks, but also about the business opportunities. Before I give room for our excellent presenters today, I would like to tell a bit more about why this whole thing is actually something that investors should care for. Let's start by taking a look at where do we stand with climate change today. The fact of the matter is that the global temperature has increased by around 1.1 Celsius compared to pre-industrial era. And the emissions are only increasing. The largest emitters are still energy, transportation and industry. And those are the sectors where we should really invest in clean technologies. Of course, one of the really critical matter when we go forward is also the role of critical infrastructure. We need to ensure that the grid capacity is big enough, and also that the critical infrastructure such as networks are working, even though the climate change impacts might be increasing. If we want to decrease emissions, there are a few topics which are going to increase. First of all, the amount of regulation is going to increase, and that will have a direct impact on companies and company operating environments. Second thing is the fact that the extreme weather is going to increase as well. We have already witnessed the heat waves in Southern Europe last summer, which had a direct impact on the agricultural product prices and drove the inflation forward. So we already know that there are certain sectors which are impacted by climate change. Another example is insurance sector, where we already know that due to increased precipitation and flooding on certain areas, the insurance coverage might be not available. So there are many kind of changes on natural phenomena, but also direct impacts on business. If we think about current emission projection, a few years back, the world leaders agreed that we should target to have 1.5 Celsius global warming scenario. Unfortunately, today we are on a path towards around 2.7 or 3 Celsius global warming scenario. What does this mean? Basically, the economic impacts increase when the emission amounts increases. To achieve the targets, like I said, we need to have a lot of innovations, a lot of investments in clean technologies, in energy efficiency activities, and we are also expecting to have a lot of new regulation appearing. Regulation is specifically relevant in European Union, and during the Green Deal, we have already witnessed sort of a tsunami in sustainability-related regulation. In US and in China, the way is a little bit different, but the green transition is progressing on those areas as well, benefiting certain technologies above the rest of technologies. But what does this then what does this mean from economic point of view? This is just one estimation. When we think about estimating the macroeconomic development, we know that we are talking about the broad spectrum of topics. So we have a variety of estimations existing. But what you can see here already is that the more the world warms up, the bigger the economic impacts will be. And there will be a significant variation between different regions. If we take a look at this 2.7 Celsius global warming scenario we are heading today, the estimation is that the global GDP impacts would be around -7 to -10, even up to -14% by the mid-century. And this is mainly including the natural impacts. I wanted to take up few examples and few topics which were highly related to climate change. The climate change is extremely complicated topic. It's impacting economy indirectly and directly. And thereby it's also impacting the company operating environments directly and indirectly. The first topic I wanted to emphasize today is the increased need for energy. The electrification of sectors is seen as means and tool to decrease emissions in many sectors. But to produce clean energy, we still need more energy. So new technologies and new innovations are needed, added with energy efficiency activities. This, of course, also makes an extreme pressure on critical infrastructure, such as grid. We have one tricky topic when we're talking about the clean energy investments and clean energy project, and that's the topic of critical minerals. The fact of the matter today is that European Union is really dependent on China when it comes to critical minerals. And why the critical minerals are essential when we talk about green energy projects? We need those minerals to produce wind turbines, and we need those minerals to produce electric vehicles. So, considering the current geopolitical tension and related trade policy developments, this might be a topic which gets even more complicated going forward. The third one I wanted to point up is the regulation involvement and the role of science when the regulation is developing and evolving. The green transition has meant that in European Union there has been a huge amount of green regulation, ranging from carbon border adjustment mechanism to sustainability reporting and to Reforestation Act. The regulation is mostly based on scientific evidence. At least it is said to be based on scientific evidence to the extent possible. But the science evolves. And we have good examples on wood industry, and we have good examples from packaging industry. What was considered like green 5-10 years ago might not be considered as green today. So companies are also facing the challenge that they need to monitor the sort of scientific development. What kind of impacts do the products have? Will there be new restrictions on certain products? Will certain markets restrict certain products because of broader environmental impacts than only energy consumption or amount of CO2 emissions? Fourth point is trade politics and increase in geopolitical tensions. I already referred to these topics a bit earlier, but now we have already witnessed something like that, or sort of the beginning of this discussion during this autumn, when we had the sort of debate and activities around electric vehicles and the trade barriers related to that. Now we have new US administration. We have already seen Inflation Reduction Act a few years back, which was quite protective for US industry. And it had impact on the Finnish industries as well. Will these increase with the current geopolitical tensions? And what will that mean for the business opportunities arising from green transition? And last but not least is the role of artificial intelligence. We need artificial intelligence to have new energy efficiency applications, to find innovations to decrease the emissions. But at the same time, artificial intelligence is also increasing the geopolitical tensions because we have the competition going on between China and US on this area. I wanted to emphasize 4 topics which are actually important for companies going forward. So the first one is that there will be an increasing need for energy efficiency activities. That is something that companies can benefit from. They can find new innovations, new business opportunities, but at the same time, they also need to think whether their own business operations need to be adjusted. And that might mean that there is a need for new investments. Emission targets is also something that we are expecting to see to be regulated on many areas. We have already witnessed that will be the case in Europe, in European Union, to be more specific. And we are expecting that emission targets will be mandatory in other areas as well. For many sectors, this will actually mean that they might need to change the location or model of their supply chain, or even reconsider the products they produce. The second thing I wanted to emphasize is the identification of winning technologies. And it's not only technologies, I'm also talking about generally about products. Like I said, we have already seen that what has been considered green like 5-10 years ago might not be green anymore. And there have been new restrictions which might impact, for example, permit processes, which might then slow down the process implementation in certain sectors. This is something which will be impacting companies going forward. And this is really, really difficult topic because the science is evolving continuously. Third one is the geopolitical risks. What is happening to trade barriers? How they're going to develop? We have the new administration in US, but also Europe has kind of wakened to the idea that they are sort of lagging behind on many areas. So perhaps in Europe, there will be some activities to be done on this area. And companies need to quite actively monitor this development going forward to be able, they are agile enough and adjust their operations if needed. The fourth point is related to everything I just said, because the natural risks, natural catastrophes, heat waves, flooding, precipitation, that's a global phenomena, although regional variations exist. So those are impacting the supply chain organizations everywhere and supply chain companies everywhere. Companies are so impacted by the fact that supply chain shocks will appear increasingly, not only due to the natural disasters, but also due to the fact that all of these activities I just described, winning technology selection, energy efficiency, and emission target investment needs, and geopolitical risks are touching us all. This was all from my side, and I'm happy to welcome Ramsay from Taaleri to the stage.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here to talk about climate change and how Taaleri and Taaleri's operations are part of mitigating them and also helping to create a more sustainable society. Looking at the headline for my presentation, Investments Powering the Change, I think the silver lining here is that these investments are very expensive. If we want to accomplish the changes, the desired changes, then they will cost, because most of these investments, in particular when it comes to climate change, they are very capital intensive. They are, of course, long duration assets, but nevertheless, a lot of capital is needed to be able to pull through with the change through these investments. Well, starting off with what is Taaleri? So we say we're a Nordic investment and asset manager that focuses on businesses with industrial scale opportunities within bioindustry and renewable energy. For us, we come from a Nordic base, so our value approach is sort of very rooted in the Nordic environment. I think the Nordic region has been in the forerunner when it comes to ESG and sustainability, and I think that is a very strong position to look out into the world. And when we say that we're an investment and asset manager, mainly we operate through funds. So we have private equity funds where we have investors investing through us and we manage those investments. There we have three business areas. It's renewable energy, bioindustry, and real estate investments. And in all of these, there's sort of a clear sustainability focus, but also very big climate change impact, in particular from renewable energy and bioindustry. But when we say we're an investment manager, it means that we also invest money from our own balance sheet. And we have several investments, especially within our bioindustry space, where, of course, the investments aim to solve the problems that we're facing today in a profitable manner, may I say. And then when we say industrial scale opportunities, this means that these are large scale investments. We're talking about tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of euros. This is the way to tackle the climate change. This is the way to do business within our chosen business verticals. And our sort of spearheads are the bioindustry and the renewable energy business, because from within these industries, we think that we can, from Finland as a base, build international businesses. Here's a summary of Taaleri, and on the left-hand side, you have a timeline that represents Taaleri's history. Taaleri was founded in 2007. And as you can see, there are a lot of dots as we move to today. This has been a very entrepreneurial company. We have started several new businesses. Some we have sold. But then the big change, what really happened was in 2021, when we sold our wealth management business operation to Aktia, and we focused on our bioindustry, renewables, and real estate business. We do also own a company called Garantia. It's a insurance company that gives insurances, credit insurances or credit guarantees. But today we will not be focusing on Garantia, but on the other business lines. A little bit of us as a company. We're about 130 people right now. We have offices in several places. Our main office is in Helsinki. We have an office in Tampere, Finland, also in Oulu, but then we have an office in Budapest, one in Spain, and we are active in Texas. We don't actually have an office in Texas, but we have operations there. The assets under management that we today are managing is 2.6 billion euros, and our balance sheet is 300 million euros, and our equity is 200 million euros. Okay. A lot of companies talk about their mission. We talk about our purpose. It's basically the same thing. But what is it that we believe our purpose is? Well, we believe it is where we distinguish ourselves is that we can combine certain technical expertise we call it here our deep industrial and financial expertise with capital. So we have technical understanding and we have an understanding for the capital markets. We can put together fairly complex solutions for situations that demand some understanding from both the technical side and the financial side. And we want to create attractive returns for all our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are our limited partners, i.e. the investors in our funds, our shareholders, our employees, and then of course the environment that we are working in. And we think that by doing what we do, we build actually a better future. So that's very much in the core of what Taaleri represents and what our purpose is. Our vision is to become a leading investment manager operating internationally in bioindustry and renewable energy. And I think, as I said earlier, this is really that if we can use Finland as a base for building viable, profitable businesses internationally, then we have succeeded. Okay. Our business model, if we start from the lower end of this picture, of course, we're around because we have shareholders who believe in us. They own our shares. There's about 15,000 of them. We're listed on the stock exchange. They are interested in understanding where do our returns come from. So our returns, that's on the upper end of this picture. We have these private equity funds where there's a management fee that the fund pays to us. And then if we are successful, we get a performance fee from these funds. So typically there's a hurdle rate. So above a certain hurdle rate, if we manage to perform that, then we are eligible to get a performance fee. So that is sort of something that then eventually comes to the shareholders. Then I talked about our direct investments. If we are successful in our direct investments and we can create value through either dividends from them or that we sell them, then that is also returns for our shareholders. And in Garantia, as it's an insurance company, there they receive premiums when they underwrite insurance or guarantees, and then they have an investment portfolio. So all this comes to our shareholders, but nothing of this wouldn't be possible unless in the middle we have this impact, growth and value creation. And it's really the impact we're going to talk about today, but I think it's also good to note that growth is sort of part of the proposition here. As we heard, there's a lot of need and a lot of capital will be consumed to create this desired change when it comes to climate. And so therefore, that is part of our sort of proposition here. Value creation is really important because unless we can create value, we won't be able to demonstrate that our investors get returns. Then of course that sort of won't work in the long run. So one of the sort of essential ingredients in our success is of course that we have this value creation. And this is all possible because of the human capital that's on the right hand side here and the talent and the ambition of our employees. This is really human capital in the end, or actually in the beginning and in the end, it centers all about the employees that we have and their skills that then we can put into production. Okay, so going over to our strategy, we renewed our strategy at our Capital Markets Day last November, and we had sort of four clear goals here. One is growth, and what we say is we want to grow within our businesses, both through the funds that we manage, and then through our direct investments. And growth is important for several reasons, but one is the fact that if you are in a business that is growing, you want to grow with that market. You want to stay relevant or become even more relevant within your value chain and within your sub-supplier network. So by growing, you get critical mass, which in itself will serve you. The other thing is that if you grow, you are able to attract more talent. And as I said, this is all about human capital. So for us, growth also serves the fact that we can hire the best talent out there and keep them working for us. The direct investments for us, where our funds cannot invest. So the funds have a specific mandate, but those mandates don't cover everything. They can be limited to certain activities. And where we see opportunities within especially the bioindustry space, there we have said that we will do selected direct investments. And so we have done also. Then we said about these direct industrial investments, we said that we want to cooperate with industrial partners. And what this really means is that especially in the bioindustry space, you are dependent on your feedstock. So somebody delivers you the raw materials, and you're dependent on the off-takers, the buyers of your product. So you can either partner with the ones who provide the feedstock. It doesn't always have to be a sort of ownership partnering. It can be a partnership that is of long duration but has monetary value, and also with the off-takers. Sometimes it means also investments in the companies that we're also investors in. The third point here was that we want to expand our investor base, and we've said that half or over 50% of all the investors in our new funds should be from international investors. And the point here is that there's an ample pool of money outside of Finland, and Taaleri historically hasn't had that much exposure to the international investor community, but we are taking good steps in that direction, and our latest renewable energy fund today has 53% of their investors are non-Finnish, i.e. international investors. And then finally, when it comes to impact and sustainability, depending on the fund, depending on the product, we have a little bit of a different sort of toolkit, but we manage both the sustainability and the impact in these investments through their whole life cycle. So we come in with a certain toolkit, and then we follow suit all the way through till the exit. There we go. Okay, the megatrends driving our business. So first one is climate change. That's why we're here today. And of course, climate change, this is going to be the warmest year in history, 2024. So I think, it's ambitious to think that we're just going to limit it at 1.5% Celsius. Maybe we will, but it's all about mitigating also, primarily greenhouse gases that then are driving this temperature rise. Electrification, we also heard about that recently. I mean, everything is going to be electrified, everything from electric vehicles to the energy consumption. And of course, our renewable energy is in the center of that. Changing values. So one could easily say that values change over time, but I think the consumers today are very aware of what the carbon footprint in their products are, and they will become even more aware as we go forward. People want recycled materials also to be used, and so these values, they do change over time, but especially our bioindustry business is in the center of this. Resource efficiency, I think here it's really all about productivity and optimization. And we know that in, for instance, the solar photovoltaic, so the solar space, and within renewable energy, there's been huge productivity going through for the last 20 years. That is why renewable energy today is actually cost competitive, which it wasn't 10 years ago. You needed subsidies if you wanted to produce renewables, but it's not the case today. So productivity is really the word. And a lot of the businesses that we are in, part of the proposition is actually that it's known sort of substances or known processes, but today, thanks to productivity, you can actually do it in an economical way. And then finally, urbanization. This has partly to do with the demography that, in the Western world, but I guess also in places like China, the population is getting older. It's easier to serve people if you have the services close by. And the estimate is that 80% of people will live in cities by 2050. So the urbanization has a big impact here. This slide tells you that we're a pioneer in seizing transformative opportunities. And this is true, and especially for sustainable economy issues, this is even more true. And in 2011, we were the first ones to develop an industrial scale wind farm in Finland. Today, in 2023 or 2023, we started to raise our sixth renewable energy fund. So that has become a core part of our business today. In 2012, we started our first fund in forestry, our first forest fund. We've actually sold all those funds, so that is a business that we have exited. But in 2021, we established our first bioindustry fund, which is a growth fund, and so forth. So what I would say is that, we've had an ability to discover opportunities, and we've had an ability to show and demonstrate that you can economically build businesses in new opportunities. And that is very much embedded in Taaleri's DNA. We heard about electrification, and I think there's a big ambition to sort of have all the energy produced from non-fossil sources in the future. In this picture, which might not be that easy to see, but you can see the sort of brownish part vanishes until 2050. And the point is that the energy mix will change and fossils will be phased out, and then you will have renewables that will come in. Renewables, hydrogen. If there's actually fossil in the future, I guess a lot of people think that it's going to be combined with carbon capture and storage, and that is probably what will happen. This is, of course, going to cost a lot. But the energy consumption is expected to rise, so this means that the electrification will rise even more. Here it said that it's going to rise threefold by 2050. That's an estimate, it might be higher or lower, but it is going to increase substantially. And here, if we look at the addressable market for renewable energy, this is the growth in generation capacity. And if you look at the text down there, it says that 900 gigawatts needs to be developed in onshore wind and solar and battery storage solutions until 2030. That's only 6 years from now. To put that into perspective, in Finland we generate on a yearly basis 80 gigawatts. So that is more than tenfold in 6 years within these two jurisdictions, Europe and North America, that needs to be, the capacity needs to grow to be able to or that's actually an estimate of how much it's going to grow. And then, how is this going to be financed? The sum 275 trillion is the amount that is believed is the investment amount that needs to be used to get to this zero carbon emission by 2050. 275 trillion. Global GDP today is about 100 trillion. So this means that within the next 25 years, we will spend 3 times today's GDP to get here. It's just a huge sum. Future will tell us whether we get there or not. Up to 1.5 trillion per year will come from institutional investors. 6.4 is the sum every year that needs to be invested, and some is coming from sort of other solutions. But investors will cough out 1.5 trillion in the coming years. That is a huge sum. Just put that into comparison, we manage 2.6 billion. So, I mean, there's a lot of space for us to grow if we run our businesses in a diligent and profitable way. Market trends. First one is tailwinds for investing in bioindustry and renewables. Well, I'd say those tailwinds had tapered off a little bit. I mean, we heard about the IRA in the US. That was a huge tailwind. In a way, it's impossible to know what the new Trump administration is going to do. To some extent, there might, of course, be that we're seeing some headwinds, but I guess that's not the biggest catastrophe as such, because when you have these huge initiatives, it sucks all the capacity and it drives prices higher. So actually, even if there's a good undercurrent, maybe the tailwinds won't be there as strong as they have been recently. We still know that people want to have supply and security of supply and self-sufficiency on energy, partly due to the war that Russia started in Ukraine. You want to secure your own energy base. And then regulatory changes, those will not change overnight. These are very long processes. And currently, we also heard about those earlier, but the fact is that these undercurrents are not going anywhere anytime soon. And then if we look at the bar charts here, this is investors' interest in sustainable investments over the next 12 months. There still seems to be an interest to get exposure globally to these investments. Okay, sustainability in our funds and investments. So the cornerstones are really sort of around these global sustainability objectives. We talked about climate change and the mitigation there. And here, if we look in the bioindustry space, we do invest in companies that replace harmful substances. There might also be these solutions where they're biodegradable solutions compared to non-biodegradable solutions. And then also, when talking about promotion of circular economy, we've invested in companies that recycle plastics. So, we're involved in most of these headlines, but with different products. And then if we look at affordable housing, I think, on sustainable cities, of course, the energy efficiency and energy mix is crucial here. And when we do our new funds and build new housing, this is, of course, something that we take into account. Very much so. Moving over to our business units, we start with the renewable energy. And here if we think of what we're doing, as I said, we do utility scale wind, solar, and energy storage solutions. We are sort of unique in the way that we do everything from development to financing, construction, and then we operate these assets. Eventually, we sell them as they are in fund formats, but that's how we operate. Today, we have 9.5 giga. It's 9.5 today, the portfolio of wind and solar assets. Out of those, productional is slightly under 3 giga today. And the sustainability goals that we have set out to tackle within the renewable energy is replacing fossil energy production. That's pretty sort of obvious as it's renewables. And then, of course, mitigating climate change. Last year, we managed to reduce the equivalent of 632,000 tons of carbon in the energy we produced. That's a huge number. We have 1.7 billion euros under assets under management within our renewable energy, and today we have 6 funds within that space. Within our bio industry, here we think we're sort of a European front runner, as we were the first ones to put out a bio industry fund. It's a growth fund that aims to help companies that already have known products that have a market, to scale those products. So typically it means that we help them to build a new production facility. We also have some direct investments here. One is in a tall oil factory called Fintoil, southern Finland, and then we're building a biocoal factory in Joensuu. The sustainability goals here are promotion of circular economy, replacement of fossil and virgin materials, and mitigating climate change. And worthwhile mentioning is that 75% of the raw materials used are renewables within our bio industry space. Okay, within Taaleri real estate, here it's more comes on the sort of sustainability factors, and it's just, of course, energy efficiency, but then we also have sustainable housing. So we have 900 affordable rental apartments available, either built or being built for people who want to rent them. If we look at our funds, 85% of the assets under management that we today manage are under SFDR, so under this EU SFDR regulation 8 or 9 article funds. And 100% of our new funds will be either Article 8 or Article 9 funds. We have also committed ourselves to the Net Zero Asset Management Initiative and the Principles for Responsible Investment. And if we go over to our sort of net zero commitments. So we've said that by 2050, we will have zero emissions, and also we'll be carbon neutral by 2050. And of course, the funds that we manage will all be committed to net zero. By 2030, it's going to be 75% of these. But if we look at our sort of carbon footprint and carbon handprint, we can see that our footprint is rather small. It's 2,200 tons per year, but then our handprint is 633,000 tons per year. So there's sort of a 300x of more taking out than putting in carbon into the system on the behalf of Taaleri. And looking at our impact figures as a whole, we produced 2.2 gigawatts of renewable energy last year. That's an equivalent of 150,000 households that could cover their entire energy need for a year. And we went through the carbon handprint, and I think we've sort of gone through these numbers. So I'll wrap up here, and I realize I'm way over time, but thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. It was quite a broad spectrum of topics you managed to cover. It was extremely interesting, and we got few questions from the audience as well. And one reminder for all of you who are following the stream, you are also allowed to send the questions in Finnish. I tried to translate them here as we speak. But hey, let's start with few basic questions. You talked a lot about that you are having the kind of engineering talents and knowledge in-house, as well as then the financial knowledge and talents in-house. So you're managing the whole sort of portfolio in a way. So the whole project management is under Taaleri, right?
Yes.
So you said it yourself in your presentation, and I referred to the fact that the regulation is continuously changing. So what is your kind of magic on this? How do you ensure that the projects you select and you invest in are sort of those ones which are among the winning technologies and green technologies in few years of time?
Yeah, well, I'd separate technology and regulation because technologies are, of course, developed on their own, naturally aiming to solve something or improve something. But yeah, it's not easy. I mean, I guess in the renewable energy space, it's easy to say that since we're not dependent on feed-in tariffs anymore, it is market-based, and when it's market-based, it's easier to operate. So I think that's sort of course, something that is good to remember. When it comes to the bioindustry space, I think the risks are higher there for many reasons. They're also very long duration assets, but I guess there, you got to do your risk assessment very sort of precisely and understand what are the risks that you are exposing yourselves to. So in a way, you're absolutely right. There's this regulatory framework and this regulatory risk, and some of these are sort of, let's take the EU, they're EU level regulations, but then countries can vary in implementation them and they can change them. And so I guess in the end, when you have long duration assets, there must be some belief that this framework, the sort of the large framework, that is not going to crack if you're dependent on regulation, if you're dependent on carbon credits, etc., etc. But then again, the other part with the regulation is that it's fairly slow to change. So once you have sort of regulation in place, it is quite sticky, and the future will of course tell. So we will learn a lot of how this will develop. But I think the intention from our point of view is that you eventually have to choose your battles then. That which risks are you actually willing to expose yourself to, and which risks are you willing to let your clients get exposure to. But then there are, of course, technical solutions. If we go to the technical side, that might just be so good that, without regulation or with the regulation, they're still going to be there because there is just a huge productivity enhancement, or there's something that in the process is just new and profitable. So I would separate these a little bit, but there's, of course, in the grand scheme, we're exposed to both of them.
Yeah. Hey, let's go a bit more deeply into this productivity and efficiency development. I must ask these questions because I think that this is something that everyone is interested in concerning all sectors. How do you see that the role of artificial intelligence is actually changing your business or your way of working? Do you see that, and during which time? Do you see that we are there, like in half a year of time, there will be big changes, or are we still waiting for the big breakthrough?
Well, I think, again, I would kind of split it into several. One is sort of on the businesses itself. One is on sort of more general topics. But I think definitely there are sort of low-hanging fruits that you should explore, and we will explore, and some of them we already explore. But I think if you sort of look at just a project as such and project management, I think that still there it's very much people's business, because I think historically you've had access to really good tools. Do you use them in the right way? Are you effective enough? Is your personnel good enough in using them? Are your subcontractors the right ones, etc.? So I think that won't go away. But when it comes to the data you have, so for instance windmill data, I think that is something where you can, that's proprietary data that you can then use for your benefit. And I think that is sort of these things which are unique for us and which we can tap into. But generally, I think AI will, and it probably already is, a lot of people are sort of tapping into it, and it has huge productivity gains. And just when you think of a company like ours, we have projects all over the place, standard templates. You can just do a lot. Those are other low-hanging fruits, but they are not perhaps so. They're not the hot topic of how you think that you can reap more benefits and more returns. But I think it's inevitable. It will be part of your daily sort of operations, whether you want it or not. Slowly but surely, everybody's going to be using artificial intelligence. But I think you have to think very hard as a company that if you have proprietary data, how can you populate that and use that to your benefit than with public data?
Yeah. Well, the artificial intelligence actually reminds me about another kind of a hot topic, which is the one of critical minerals. You also referred to the challenges in mineral supply and supply chain in your own presentation. But do you see that the fact that the European Union is rather dependent on China when it comes to critical minerals and the supply chains are quite localized on this, do you see that this could actually be risks for your business, and how do you manage those risks if there are any?
Well, of course, we're sort of a fairly small fish in a large pond. So I would say that this is something that then affects everybody, especially in the renewable energy business. In bioindustry, not so much dependent perhaps when it comes to the production of any minerals there, because there it's been more biomass based, and that's more local. You don't transport biomasses over long areas. It's very expensive. But I think everybody's sort of wrestling with the same issues. Having said that, though, if you look at the supply chains, some of them they are very China dependent, and what you can do about this is, of course, you have to be nimble about your the sort of disclosures that you get, and that you're aware of how they're manufactured, where they're manufactured, etc. But to localize all of the components, I mean, that is a massive project, and it's not going to happen overnight. So I think we're all in the same chain, or sort of in the same pond. But I don't know. I mean, now there's talks about a free sort of customs deal with 4 South American countries, and some of them have minerals that you mentioned. So there might be actually the fact that you are so dependent on a certain supplier then might create new opportunities elsewhere.
Yep. Then let's change the topic a bit. You talked a bit about the electrification of everything, and that of course also means that the grid capacity is something which need to be maintained, but also further developed. Well, Taaleri is sort of investing in windmill projects and clean energy projects. Do you see that the grid capacity could actually kind of act as a bottleneck when it comes to the project development?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we start off in Finland, I think the Finnish grid actually was voted last year to be the most efficient TSO. So Fingrid is in really good shape. So I think, and actually we are the biggest producer of wind in Finland with an 8% market share. So here, I mean, things in Finland are good. So if you have somebody say something else, I think it's always a relative game. But there are and there is going to be bottlenecks internationally when it comes to grid capacity, that's for sure. And of course, one thing is that now, I mean, I can only say what I read in the newspapers, but I know that this AI megascaler sort of race will, to the extent that you will build out all this data center capacity, it will create bottlenecks. So I think you're absolutely right about that. And then some of the countries we're operating in, luckily we've been there around for quite a while, so they know us and we know the process. So we get the grid connection. It's very much at the beginning of when we start a project, when we evaluate it, it's very much, or it is one of the most important things that we consider whether it's worthwhile developing that project or not. Because if there is not a certainty for grid capacity or grid connection, you just can't forward that, because then it's a sunk cost and it's not really worth anything.
Thank you. Then let's take few questions from the audience. So the first one would be that what kind of new hot businesses has Taaleri seen in the sustainability scheme? And if I myself may continue, I started to be interested in, for example, potential carbon capture or other innovative areas.
Oh, we've seen a lot. I mean, everything from hydrogen production to carbon capture solutions within the water space. There's a lot that we have seen, but we have to sort of concentrate our efforts on our existing business lines. We can't spread out too much. You have to sort of choose your battles there, and I'm sure these are a little bit cyclical. At one stage there was a lot about hydrogen. Now it seems like there's a lot about other energy storage solutions. So it's battery storage solutions and balancing the grid and so forth. But for us, to be quite honest, we're concentrating on our renewable energy and our bioindustry, and within those we have enough sort of work to deal with going forward. And if anything interesting or something else comes along in the future, then that may happen. But we are not easily tempted to just go into something new.
Then the second question was that how does Taaleri balance the financial and ESG perspectives in the investments?
So I would say that there is this SFDR regulation, so the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which is the Article 8 and 9. And so then you build clear templates when you enter into an investment. And then actually you follow these templates through and populate them, and you help the companies along to sort of be compliant. I mean, one is that the thing is that you are not compliant unless you are able to disclose these things. So a lot of companies are doing the right things, but as they don't disclose them, they are not kind of compliant, it's a little bit of an enigma, but that is how it is. And therefore what we do there is, of course, that we have our ESG specialists who then do these assessments, and then they help the companies or the projects. And it's all about asking the right questions, filling in the right forms, and then helping the project or the companies then to sort of fulfill the criteria that are needed. And so that's sort of how we work with it. And it is part of the assessment when we make the investment decisions is, of course, also that, is this ESG compliant or not? And then you have the SFDR, which is a clear regulation under which then it's stipulated on what kind of things need to be done. So it's very mechanical and it's very time consuming, but at the same time, when you've built the processes, then you can multiply those.
And then the third one from the audience. Do you see any potential risks that could arise in Europe impacting Taaleri due to political decisions made in the US?
Well, I'm sure. I mean, if you put in huge sort of trade barriers, customs, it's going to affect growth in Europe, or might be inflationary, depending on what it is. So, that sort of consumes then resources, or it becomes more expensive. I mean, you can envision a lot of various paths which sort of can have an impact. But on the other hand, as I said, if sort of the pace for the IRA comes down a little bit, it means that capacity is then available for investments in Europe. And market economies are actually quite dynamic. It has been proven time after time. So if something, or market economies sort of work in the way that if investments become unprofitable, they just won't be done. So that's one part of it. But if you have an outright trade war, that's not good for anybody. And in the case of Europe, I think it can certainly be harmful. But I think it's really early days. So I think one should not perhaps draw too far going conclusions at this stage, and then see sort of what materializes out of that and what not. Yeah, exactly. I think that the development in US has been rather protective during the past few years anyway. So it's interesting to see what will happen. But maybe the last question, what
should happen in your mind that the investments in clean transition would start to accelerate to the pace which is requested to achieve the 1.5? What are the 3 most important topics?
Well, I think clear regulation in the sense that if you really want to do this from a regulatory perspective, it has to be concise and people have to underwrite that so that the rules are kind of clear. So I think that is sort of one thing. Then if you think of this from a global perspective, which I guess is necessary in the end to do, I think there needs to really be then actually a dialogue between the different stakeholders. And then I talked about different jurisdictions. And you talked about the border adjustment tax. So these are things that are being introduced in order to have a plain sort of level play field for everybody. And I think trust in that these mechanisms are there. I think that is equally important. But then finally, I don't know. It's a huge cost associated with it, and I think nothing happens sort of overnight. These things, there tends to be sort of a pendulum that swings, and we had a very good sort of momentum on green investments a couple of years ago, and I feel that pendulum has it's going in the other direction right now, whether we want it or not. So I think what's going to happen is the pendulum is going to move a little bit more, and then it comes back. And every time it's cyclical. So every time this happens, then it comes back even stronger. So when the financial crisis came in 2008, 2009, you could see that the green initiatives, the green investments really died because a lot of economies were on their knees. But when Corona came around, it actually didn't happen. It accelerated. Now we have a little bit of a backlash, and I think what actually will drive this is productivity in the end. So you will have solutions that are just economically viable, and that's what's going to push it through. The US was very much behind Europe when it came to sort of green investments, and they solved it with 3 legislative things. One was the Inflation Reduction Act, they had the CHIP Act, and they had the infrastructure bill. So I think also these impulses, when they come, they will push it forward. But I don't think there's one unison, and there's not like 3 things as such. But I think it's just that people have to trust that the regulatory frameworks are there and that they're sticky and that they won't change. Because if you're going to do investments that are very long duration, very capital intensive, you need to have some sort of visibility.
Thank you, Peter. I think this was a really good insight into Taaleri's business and I think clean energy transition as well. Thank you very much. And
thanks.
Now I would like to welcome Minna Kröger from Elisa.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Minna Kröger. I'm head of the sustainability in Elisa. I will now walk you through briefly first about Elisa and about Elisa sustainability. Then we will jump into the climate topic about climate targets, and we will review the risks and opportunities and levers. How do we manage the climate change risks and opportunities in Elisa in a general level? Unfortunately, this time is not enough me to go into the very detailed level, but I hope you get a good view on how Elisa manages climate risks and opportunities. Elisa, first Elisa in brief. Most of you, I hope, and if not, now you will know that Elisa is a Finnish market leader in telecommunications and in digital services. With the digitalization, we provide solutions for things that are important for people and for sustainability development. During our over 140-year history, we have always been inspired about utilizing new technologies and ways of working. Today, we serve over 2.8 million customers in Finland, in Estonia, and over 100 countries globally. We work daily to improve the customer experience and quality. In 2023, our revenue was 2.2 billion euros, and we employed 5,700 people in more than 20 countries. Sustainability has been integrated into our strategy over a decade, and our mission is a sustainable future through digitalization. Our actions have positive impacts on sustainability development. We support our customers globally in their sustainability efforts. We promote fair and responsible digitalization. We secure people's privacy and a critical infrastructure here in Finland and in Estonia. And we safeguard cybersecurity, for example, through our Security Operations Center. And we also, with our measures, with our business, accelerate the green transition. And one example could be the efficiency in our own, improving the efficiency in our own networks, but also through distributed energy system service that we provide for our corporate and consumer customers. We are working continuously to reduce the negative impact of our own operations. We are committed to UN Global Compact and achieving net zero emissions by 2040. Our work has been recognized by third-party institutes, and we are rated as one of the most sustainable companies in the world. We have set ambitious climate targets. Like said before, the sustainability has been in our strategy over a decade, and the climate has been in the very core of our sustainability work. We have set targets over the years and updated them and updated our ambition accordingly. Here in this view, you can see the kind of the view and performance of our climate until these days. You can also see our climate targets. Our mid-term target is to reduce our own energy consumption, emissions from our own energy consumption, and emissions from our supply chain by 42 by 2030. By 2040, which was already previously said, we are aiming to reach the net zero. which means that we will reduce our own emissions by 2040 by 90% from 21. As you can see from this view, it is quite ambitious, since with our own emissions, own operation emissions, it is a quite small amount from the total. The upstream and the downstream supply chain and the customer activities cover more than 99% of our emissions today. But this level of ambition is required, like we heard in the previous presentation. The regulative requirements are very much focusing on companies to have science-based targets that are aligned with the Paris Agreement. And that is the ambition that we have. We have done, or our sustainability work has always been based on materiality assessment, to understand what are the business impacts, where should we focus. This year, we have updated accordingly our materiality assessment so that it is aligned with the CSRD regulation requirements. And as you can see, the climate change mitigation and climate change adaptations, they are above the threshold. We have impact on climate change mitigations, and we have opportunities in climate change adaptation. It is important to understand what are the risks and opportunities that are related to these impacts and the financial materiality. In general, our risk assessment covers both physical and transitional climate risks. This is kind of the approach that we have had already several years. The risks and opportunities here are in a general level, but it is kind of illustrating to you our thinking and approach. In operations, you need to go into a more detailed level and to get the robust understanding what are the risks and what are kind of the details there. The physical risks are the impacts of climate change that relate to extreme weather conditions, extreme hots or storms, as well as environmental incidents in our supply chain. These might cause disruptions in our own operations, such as power failure or disruption in supply of products, floods in some manufacturing site causing production stoppages or so forth. Transition risks, which I think at the moment are very topical and much of this under discussion, is the risks that relate to the transition to a lower carbon economy. And this might cause and is causing already risks in costs of energy, costs of materials, and also increasing the stakeholder expectations from the ICT industry for the sustainability. You can see here these 3 tabs, 1, 2, and 3. I will go them through a little bit later and explain to you how they link into the levers that we are using in our climate transition plan. This is the climate transition plan where we have kind of utilized the double materiality work, the risks and opportunities, updated our climate risks, and also utilized our own data, but then also utilized third-party expertise and industry averages. The framework shows to you, has kind of 3 aspects. It shows to you how big is the investment. It shows to you how complex are the levers, how much work, how much time it would require in order to get there, to kind of implement those levers. And it also shows you what is the impact from the carbon emission point of view. Here the view is cumulative. We have kind of calculated what is the cumulative view until 2030. And then, of course, under these kind of upper level levers, we have the more granular, more robust levers, which are more actionable. If I now go through three of those levers that are important for us for our climate transition. And the one big area is those quick wins, having the low complexity, and those are the kind of the levers which are very much in our hands. We heard in the previous presentation a discussion about the energy efficiency. That is really an essence for us. We have been working for the energy efficiency already several decade, and we have been improving our energy efficiency more than 70% since 2016 and so. And we do every year work for that. But of course, it is also getting harder and harder. But it is something that we are able to do with modernization and with simplification, what we are doing in our networks. The other area here also is the how do we procure the energy, the carbonless energy, the carbon-free energy. And there also the thinking, having kind of the plans in place and thinking about the investments like we have done with the wind PPAs some 2 years ago, and ensuring that way that we have a cost-efficient way to procure renewable energy. The other two areas are linked into the climate targets of suppliers. So once again, a little bit like a transitional area where the levers are really complex, not directly in our hand, will require investments both from us and from the suppliers, but having quite a huge impact on climate. It will require also development for better data transparency. For the climate work, the data transparency in supply chain is really essential. And in my opinion, in a way or another, the CSRD actually helps us also to develop these transparencies into our together with our suppliers. So that is really important area, requires a focus. And why I am showing you this 6 years plan, this cumulative plan with the investments needed and so forth. It is that we all need to understand that when you have time, things are in your hand. But if you don't start to work for these topics early enough, then the options are not that many. You have less options for doing your climate work. And then, of course, one might think that what are the ways to fund these investments? One way, what we have also been using is of course, utilizing the sustainable finance instruments in financing the projects. And there, of course, also you need to kind of ensure that you align with your ambitious targets and deliver the agreed results. To conclude, the sustainability is very much in the core of Elisa operations. Our long-term strategy and commitments, as well as ambitious targets. They have been acknowledged by our key stakeholders. And the work for sustainable future continues with our stakeholders and with our suppliers. Thank you for listening, and this was my part.
Thank you, Minna. Welcome. Take a chair. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
So let's start with a few questions and get a little bit deeper into some of the topics you mentioned already. And once again, a reminder for everyone who are monitoring the show, so to say, you're also allowed to send the questions in Finnish if that is easier. And I try to translate those as we speak. But let's start with discuss on data centers, because that's kind of a hot topic today. So we all know that data centers are gonna increase the energy need because they need a lot of energy for cooling and for with artificial intelligence, the energy need is only going to increase. What is Elisa's approach on data centers' energy need?
Well, our approach in energy need is, of course, focus in energy efficiency. And we have done quite a lot of different kind of investments, for example, for the cooling, so that we are able to utilize, especially the cooling part is important, so that we are able to improve the energy efficiency and so on. Then there is also kind of ways to manage the data in different way, so that actually you don't need to have that much kind of a capacity for the data management, so that you are able to optimize the data usage. And I think there Elisa has a really, well, I would say a great track record thinking about the energy efficiency work that we have done in our networks and so forth. So those are the capabilities that needs to be utilized there, and we are using those.
Maybe I take one question from the audience at this point, because you just referred to the networks.
Yes.
So few years back, at least, it was a lot discussed that 5G is consuming a lot of more energy than 4G and so forth. So what are the activities to reduce the energy consumption of new networks?
Very good and important question, because that's kind of what we do is that we develop the sustainable platform for the society to digitalize and then being able to provide the digital services, so that people, for example, don't need to go to bank anymore. They can do the banking at home. So and then we are kind of reducing the emissions from traveling. What we are doing there is, of course, modernizing the technology. That is a huge and important thing. Modernizing in a sustainable way, of course. Modernizing the technologies, and then getting rid of the kind of the old legacy technology, so that we don't have developments what Elisa experts have been doing there. And that is something that we are also selling through our Elisa Polystar businesses to other telecommunication industries.
What about, you talk a bit about your net zero target, am I correct? Yeah, so and you also talked about that you have certain activities to get there. Could you still sort of recap that what are the main activities to achieve the net zero target, and during which time frame those activities are taking place?
Well, for us, the target, the next target is -42 from the level of 21. So that's kind of the North Star here. Of course, the North Star is the net zero in 2040, but the closest one is now that one. And there we have the view that you saw is kind of an upper level view on the actions that we are doing. It's about in a very kind of small item, but it's about using heat pump, kind of changing to the heat pumps. It's about doing these energy efficiency measures like modernizing the networks. It's about thinking how do we cool the data centers. So it's really kind of these concrete actions that we do in our operations. And it's also about choosing the energy, what we are using, that we are using in, for example, for the electricity, it's carbon-free electricity, and also thinking that, okay, district heating, can we develop that further? Which is a little bit minor thing for us. The bigger things then, if we go to the elephant, what was in the room, what you saw previously, that's the supply chain. And that has required already, and thankfully we have quite good suppliers and kind of active suppliers. That requires, first of all, that we understand what is the baseline. And we have now the baseline developed. We have been calculating the scope 3 emissions from the goods and services quite a long time already, capital goods and so forth. But improving that data quality so that we are in that level that we can actually agree about actions. And it might be, and this is kind of a small example, but it could be this type of actions, like we have the subcontractors who are traveling to our sites here in Finland to agree what type of vehicles they are using in traveling, or how many times they go to the site, and are they able to kind of do things going once rather than going 3 times. So there are a lot of things and developments ongoing, and I think what is now important, we're talking very much about this how it impacts to Elisa and what we do. But I think through these kind of assessments and dialogues with our suppliers and also with our customers, there is also a lot of business opportunities with this. So if we find good ways of kind of optimizing our networks, that's a business opportunity that we can utilize when we have been able to kind of provide that as a service for other telecom operators.
You talked a bit about the requirement you set for your supply chain. Do you think that might also bring some risks? Can it, for example, increase the prices of goods and services you purchase?
I believe that it is possible that in short term it might have an impact on it. But if we think about the supplier who is providing services to customers, there is always a lot of customers. And a lot of customers now today, we also know that our customers are very acknowledged. They require more sustainable services. So I think that it might increase in some cases the prices short term, but longer term it's going to be a business as usual.
Then let's move on and talk a bit about the risks related to climate change. We now focused a lot on activities and the sort of opportunities. If you think about your operations, you are providing sort of a critical infrastructure actually for
we are providing critical
for
infrastructure.
so and we know that the climate change is impacting the critical infrastructure as well. Well, you are located in Nordics and the natural disasters are assessed to be sort of limited compared to the Southern Europe, for example. But have you assessed whether there are any sort of climate change risks which could impact your networks?
Well, basically, maybe the biggest is if we're talking about the physical risks, it's the kind of the extreme weather conditions, the kind of amount of storms, and then kind of the severity of the storms. So the windy days and really strong windy days and almost kind of a hurricane days. So that type of risks we have identified. And then, of course, sometimes already now we see days when it's raining and it's raining really hard. So then the flooding risk can be kind of a risk in our operations. But then if we think about the heat waves and so with here in north area it's not that big risk. And then I would say like you already kind of in a way hinted, but there is these big operators also, like Google just announced that they are coming to Kajaani and have a data center there, and there are other data centers also here in Finland. So I see that we are in that sense in a good position.
Now I must ask something which is sort of on everyone's table. So when we think about the current geopolitical situation and we know that the cybersecurity threats are sort of there, and with the climate change, it is estimated that the geopolitical tensions at least will not decrease, rather it will drive geopolitics. So how do you sort of assess the cybersecurity risks and do you think that climate change can further drive that? Have you assessed those together?
Well, I'm not an expert of geopolitical risks or so, but definitely as we are a provider of critical infrastructure, the cybersecurity is really in the core of our operations. And whether it's linked to the climate change or not, we really focus on that, and that's really one essence of our operations. And then to your question that is it possible that the climate change will kind of increase the cyber threats? It is possible, of course, when the tensions increase and there are the different groups who want to kind of disrupt the societies. Of course, that is possible.
Then maybe one last question, coming back to where we started on net zero target and talking about everything. How much does this all cost? You've done a massive amount of activities on risk mitigation and risk assessment, and you mentioned that you had this sustainable finance framework. Was it so? Have you assessed whether you will have a sort of additional investment needs during next few years to finance these all activities you just mentioned?
How I see it, it's kind of if we think about business, we want to do long-term business. We want to develop sustainable, and now I'm not just meaning the sustainable from environment point of view, but really sustainable business, profitable business, growth. So if we then identify that climate brings risks that we need to mitigate, and they require investments, I think it's good business to do those actions and do those investments so that we will have this sustainable business in future also, and utilize also the opportunities, because I think there is a lot of opportunities even in changing the business models and so that we are really driving the profitable growth.
Thank you, Minna. I think that was all from my side and from the audience's side. It was really interesting to have few insight into Elisa's business and approach on climate change. So for all of you following our event today, thank you, and I wish you a great evening.
Thank you.